Well, it's good to be here tonight, and I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very happy to have my friends from my church, Anselm and Shalin, come and bring the parsley. But they were coming anyway before I forgot the parsley. So I'm going to show to you tonight Messiah and the Passover. A lot of it's going to be up here on the PowerPoint, and then some of it will be down here. And then afterward, if you want to taste of a few things, you can. And if you don't, that's okay. But I like all of it. So hopefully, I just press it.
You should, yeah, unless it cut off after not being used. We might have to cut it off and back on.
Well, as the little blue thing is clicking.
Well, I'll be right back.
Okay. So while he's doing that, I'll mention the other things I have up here that don't have to do with the Passover. I did bring a few of the Bibles for y'all to come look at if you want to. For the Bibles that I send out to the Jewish people, there's a Hebrew English set and a Hebrew Spanish set. But I have them in many more languages than that, but that's just the main ones. And then there's some pamphlets up here that are all free. Okay, so any of the pamphlets and things you want, you can have those.
Okay.
Is it working?
It's on that slide, so you can do that. Is that where you wanted it?
Yep, perfect. So please come by afterward. There's also a prayer card. There's pamphlets. I wrote all the pamphlets, and they're all about the Jewish people. The one there, the Everlasting Nation, is one I just wrote. It's very, very important because there's a huge attack by people against Israel and the Jewish people, saying a lot of bad things about them. So anyway, I wrote that as a stab against those people. But anyway, I plan on writing some more too. So now let's go on into the Seder and the Passover. And I'm going to stand over here so that I won't be in your way. So there were 7 feasts given at Mount Sinai, okay?
Did it not work again?
I'll hit the slide as next.
Okay. Yeah. You may have to advance them for me. So I call these the Sinai 7. And these are all in Leviticus chapter 23. So if you want to go home and read Leviticus 23, they're all very important. Passover is the first, unleavened bread, first fruits, Shavuot, trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Okay? And that covers the whole year of the Jewish year. Now there's other holidays that have been added later. Like for example, tomorrow night at sundown is what we call in Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Day. So tomorrow night at sundown, from sundown to sundown, Israel will observe a Holocaust Day, and that begins tomorrow night. But that's a modern holiday. So the ones we're talking about tonight are only the ones in Leviticus, okay? Okay, next slide. So we're only going to look at Passover, and we're going to look at the first 3. We can't look at all of them tonight. And we're going to look at the evolution of Passover. And just remember that evolution is not a bad word, it's a stolen word, okay? So the things that God made, they don't evolve. The things that man makes can always improve because we never make it perfect. God makes it perfect, so if you change it, you're going to mess it up. So just remember that about that word, okay? There's a lot of words that get stolen. So first of all, there's 4 different things we have to look at in order to totally understand Passover. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. So the first one is the very first Passover in Egypt. You can advance it. The only time Passover was ever celebrated this way. And of course, and I did not put verses in here because there's just not enough time. But if you recall in Exodus that every family was to take a lamb and was to put it up on the 10th day of Nisan, and then on the night of the 14th of Nisan, they were to kill the lamb and put the blood around the door, and then during the night, the death angel was going to pass through the land of Egypt, but when he saw the blood, we sang the song, or they played the song, when I see the blood, I will pass over that door. Whoever was inside was safe, okay, if the blood was there. Next slide. And then, of course, at midnight, Pharaoh released the children of Israel, and they left, and they came up to the Red Sea. And, of course, God parted the Red Sea. Now, the Jewish sages tell us that the Red Sea was like the birth canal, because when the children of Israel went in, they were slaves. And when they came out the other side, they were a nation. And so it's really neat to think of it like that. The nation was born instantly. Next slide. Now, the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar, okay? This is very important to understand. So the first day of the month is always a new moon, and the 14th and 15th is always a full moon on the Hebrew calendar, not on our calendar, okay? So the fact that Passover is on the 14th of Nisan, what does that automatically tell us? There's always going to be a full moon on Passover. Now think about this small detail. You know, God is always in the details, right? When did the children of Israel leave Egypt? At midnight, right? God made sure they could see how to walk without a flashlight. He made the moon was full. Otherwise, how would they have 2 million people walking out of Egypt at midnight? How would they have done it? He said, I'll just make sure you got a full moon up there. So next slide. So it is very integral to the Jewish identity. Next slide. Okay, so that was the first one. Now, from that time all the way up to the time the temple is destroyed, I realize that there are 2 temples, okay? Solomon's temple was destroyed in 576 BC, and there were 70 years in Babylon when they didn't celebrate Passover. Then they came back, they built the second temple. I know all that, but we're just going to take all that in one big fell swoop, okay? And we're going to say from the time out of Egypt up until the destruction of the temple and the second temple in 70 AD, how was Passover celebrated? We're going to look at that. Next slide. Now, the thing you have to really realize, you see I have the little stars up there? Passover, Shavuot, and Tabernacles. These 3 are called pilgrim feast. Pilgrim, the Hebrew word is regel, which means your feet, because you have to walk to Jerusalem to celebrate it. You cannot celebrate those 3 anywhere else. You cannot celebrate them at home. You have to be in Jerusalem. Remember the story in Luke chapter 2 when Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the whole family, they take a big long trip to Jerusalem and they celebrate Passover, and then they go back home and they're 3 days and they're like, where's Jesus at? Oh, they have to go all the way back to Jerusalem and he's in the temple, right? That was during Passover. They had walked all the way down from Nazareth down to Jerusalem. So the men are required to do this. Jewish men are required to attend. Women and children are not required. Obviously they can, but they're not required, because if it was a requirement, then if you couldn't, for example, maybe someone was sick and they had to stay home or whatever, then you'd be sinning. So God didn't make it a requirement for them, but of course they can if they wanted to. So just so you know, the idea of a Passover at home was foreign as long as the temple was there. So now today, Passover is always at home, okay, because there's no temple. And we'll get to that. But just remember, they always had to come to Jerusalem. They had to purchase a lamb. That's why Jesus threw over the money changers. Remember that? He did that the first year of his ministry, and he did it the 3rd year, the week before he was crucified. He did that. And why were they there? Because they were buying and selling all these animals for the Passover. Okay, next slide. Now this is very important. Speaking to the children of Israel and saying to them concerning the feast, you see I underlined it, of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feast. 2 words, the feast and the convocations. Next slide. Okay, so now I get to teach you Hebrew. You thought you were going to get away without it, didn't you? Never if I'm speaking. So the word Moedim is the word there, and it's translated as feast, okay? And then the word, go back. The word Mikraim is translated as convocations, but another good word would be an appointment. So how many of you have a calendar that you have to live by? Like I do. I take care of my mom and dad. They're 90 and 91, so we have lots of doctor's appointments. And so I'm always like, wait, let me get the calendar before I can tell you yes or no. I have to look, see if there's a doctor's appointment. So remember these 2 words, Moedim, feast, Mikraim, convocation or appointment. Next slide. And God said, so the way we learn Hebrew words, the way we learn their meaning, okay, is if you look them up in Hebrew. Don't look up the English word, because that's just a translation, but look up the Hebrew word. If we look up Moedim, okay, we find that it's also used here in Genesis 1:14. And here is translated as seasons. Signs, seasons, days, and years. Same word, okay? So what is it? Is it a feast or is it a season? Yes, it's both. See, the thing is that Hebrew words are like big. It's like a Hebrew word is like a 5-gallon bucket. And English words are like this. They're very specific. And you take the meaning of that Hebrew word, picture a 5-gallon bucket, and you're going to pour it into here, and you're going to have a whole lot left over, okay? The Hebrew word is always bigger than the English word. English is very specific and Hebrew is very broad. For example, the word regel that I told you about, it means toe, it means foot, it means ankle, it means leg. I told my Hebrew teacher once, I said, there's a big difference between breaking your leg and breaking your foot. And she said, it's all the same word. So, next slide. Now, the Passover meal that they celebrated from the time of Moses all the way up to the destruction of the temple, they were always eating a meal, not a Seder, okay? A meal. And it had 3 parts. And it's given here in Exodus. They shall eat the lamb, the flesh of the lamb, and that night roasted with fire, and secondly, unleavened bread, which we call in matzah, which is here. Okay? I have some matzah here. And then bitter herbs, which is, we had to have parsley. Now, and for the lamb, I just have a bone, the shank bone. This is a real lamb bone, okay? It's not fake, it's not plastic. It's the real one. Okay, now, the thing about the matzah, when Moses and the children of Israel had matzah, okay, it did not look like that. Okay, this is square because it's made by a nice machine and it runs through the machine and it makes it nice and square. But how many of you like to eat pita bread, this round? And it is kind of flabby, This is hard. This really is like cardboard, but it tastes good. But this is hard, but picture a pita that's unleavened. That is how their matzah would have looked, okay? Not like this. Okay, next slide. We'll come back to that. So now that's how they had to celebrate Passover all those years. And that's really all they had. I mean, they didn't have all this, okay? We have all this today, so now I'm going to tell you how did we get this from those 3 things. Next slide. First of all, we're going to take a pit stop and look here at the Passover and the Lord's Supper. Now, I'm sure y'all have seen this picture before, Leonardo da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. My grandmother always had a little print of this in her living room. Next slide. Okay, it's totally wrong. I'm sorry. Okay. Good old Leonardo, he had good intentions, but that's not how it's going to look, okay? Next slide. This is probably more like how it looked that night, okay? For sure, Over here on the right-hand side, John, Master is Jesus, and Judas, and then over here on the left, Simon Peter. For sure, those I'm pretty sure of. The rest of them I'm not sure about, okay? So why do we have this seating arrangement? First of all, they're going to be in this circle or even a box because people can bring food there real easy, okay? Now also, Jesus is the host of the meal that night. Remember, he said, I'm going to eat the Passover with my disciples. It was his meal. So the host always sat on the right. But the host could have a guest of honor on his right and a guest of honor on his left. The highest honor was on the right, and the second highest honor was on the left. So John is on the right. But look who's on the left. Judas. And why is Judas there? Well, Judas has to be there. And I just taught this morning in my ladies' Sunday school class, because in John 13, what is Jesus doing? Over the whole chapter of John 13, Jesus is very heavy-hearted. And it says, Peter asked John, who is it? Because Jesus said, one of you will betray me. And he asked John, who is it? And by the way, that's why I think Peter is over there. Because he is making motions at John. You know, he's like, John, ask him who it is, you know. He really could only do that if he was clear across with a straight shot view. So that's why I put Peter over there. Maybe he was late getting to the meal, and he had to take the last seat, which was the farthest away. Maybe he was maybe he walked in and he saw that John and Judas were on the left and right, and maybe he was kind of sulking. And he said, well, I'll get way over here. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, he was kind of sulking, right, because he did get in trouble later, right? He denied 3 times. But for sure, he asked John, who was it? And Jesus told John, what did he say? He says, the one that I give the sop to when I dip it. Now, what on earth is a sop? We don't use that word. It just meant the pita bread. I mean, the matzah bread. You dip it in the parsley, and you can also dip it in salt water. And he gave one to Judas. Well, he could have only done that if Judas was right beside of him. Right? So that's why I put him here. Next slide. And I've already said this, that it's a meal and not a Seder yet. Okay, next slide. And on. So the Passover Seder, the Last Supper couldn't have been a Seder, okay? Because the Seder wasn't invented yet. Because why? The temple is still there, right? It's not destroyed until 70 AD. The temple's still there. Okay? Now, the Haggadah was not written. What on earth is a Haggadah? I thought you'd never ask. Okay? So I have several of them up here, and you can look at them. By the way, you can get them free at Publix. That's where these came from. They advertise them. And this is the whole Seder, okay? The whole thing, in Hebrew and in English. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all this. So still your hearts. Next slide. Now, I just put this in here again to get these words back into your mind. I don't want you to forget them. We're going to use them, okay? Moedim, Mikrayim. Next slide. Okay, now we're to the last part. The Passover and the diaspora. The diaspora is like when the temple is destroyed and the Jewish people are scattered all over the world. For 2,000 years, they were scattered. And God did that, okay? As a matter of fact, God told them he would do that before they ever entered the land of Israel. He told Moses, he said, write it down. They're going to be bad and disobey. And go ahead and tell them, when you do that, I'll send you out. You know, it's like my mother used to say, I brought you into this world, I can take you back out. My mother, my dear and wonderful mother, whom I take care of, I always tell people I never have stood in a corner, okay? She didn't believe in that. I never had my privileges removed because I didn't have any. She gave you one warning, and then that was it. Go outside, get a real hickory, bring it in, skin all the leaves off, and you got a spanking right there on your legs. Yeah. She wanted to keep me out of juvenile delinquency. God loved the Jewish people. And he says, I'm telling you right off, you're not going to get away with anything bad. I will discipline you. Tough love. Next slide. So when the temple was destroyed, biblical Judaism ceased to be. No more Judaism as it is in the Bible. Can't have it without the temple. No temple, no sacrifice. Can't sacrifice without the temple. Next slide. Can't go there anymore and celebrate Passover or Yom Kippur or any of those things. And how are you going to celebrate these? Next slide. Big problem. Because what did God say in Exodus 12? He said, this day, talking about Passover, Nisan the 14th, shall be a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. That's a Hebrew way of saying forever and ever and ever. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. That was God's command. Okay, now what are we going to do? There's no temple. Next slide. So the rabbis were left with a big problem. How can they celebrate the Passover without a temple? Next slide. And thus the Seder is born, the Passover Seder. It is a way to celebrate Passover and keep the memory alive of the Exodus and pass it on to the next generation, even though there's no temple. Next slide. So now, the Jews often borrowed from other cultures, and the Greeks had been just the previous culture. Remember, the Romans were in charge, but the culture previous to Rome were the Greeks, remember? So the Greeks had this thing called a symposium. Now, we use that word today, but what we mean is totally different than what the Greeks meant. In the Greek symposium, and here's a picture. It says on a fresco in the tomb. What is a fresco? It's like an archaeological piece, and someone etched on like a clay pot or something this picture. That's all it means. So what are they doing? They're reclining, they're eating, and they're telling stories, probably talking about politics and stuff like that. That was a Greek symposium. Next slide. And the Jews said, you know what? We could really use that. Let's incorporate that idea of eating, telling stories, and we'll use it, and we'll make something different out of it. Next slide. So here are the elements of the Seder that come from this. First of all, to properly celebrate the Seder, did you know you're supposed to recline? You're not supposed to sit up straight in a chair, but like those men were in that picture, you're just supposed to kind of recline. Why? Because you're free now. They're free, okay? This is to show freedom, because the slaves and servants, they could never, ever sit down in the presence of their master, right? They're always to stand at attention at their, they might need something. But if you're free, and you yourself have people waiting on you, then you can recline and lay around and do whatever you want to do. So it's a very long, involved meal. And the Haggadah, this book, with telling of the whole story of the Exodus. And then the number 4. There's 4 cups of juice, or some Seders, they do use wine. 4 questions, 4 sons or children. The number 4 is repeated a lot. Next slide. And so there's the Haggadah, and here's one here. Okay, next slide. And so what does it mean? It's a Hebrew word, of course. It means to tell, because you're telling the story. You're telling the story. You're retelling the story of the Exodus, and you're telling it to the next generation so that they'll tell it, and they'll tell it, and they'll keep it alive forever and ever. It's the oldest celebrated religious event in all of history.
That's right.
Is the Passover, okay? Over 3,800 years, the Jewish people have been doing this. Next slide. The text was written by different rabbis over time, but eventually it was standardized. Like this one here is pretty standard. Next slide. But it could not have been written earlier than about 170 AD. And how do we know that? Because there's a man mentioned in here by name, and that's when he lived. So they couldn't have talked about him before he was born. So that's how we know pretty much the date of the earliest date. Okay, next slide. And the oldest printed one was only printed in 1486 by the Soncino family in Italy. That's the oldest printed Haggadah. Okay, like a booklet like this. Next slide. So although the Passover Seder is weaving together a mosaic of culture, it cannot be said that Jesus celebrated that, but he did celebrate the Passover meal. Okay, and we're going to get back to that in a minute. Okay, next one. Oh, and the next one. So we're going to go through it now in a nutshell, but now you're going to see a lot of what we call messianic elements. Okay? So how did all these messianic things like get into the Seder? That's the question. Well, the thing we have to remember is that in the early times and in the early church, a lot of the Christians were Jewish. Okay, it's not like today. As a matter of fact, in the very beginning, the whole church was Jewish, right? God had to work a special miracle to make Peter just go preach to the Gentiles. And slowly, the Gentiles came in. But in early times, there were many, what we call Messianic Jews. In other words, Jews who believed in the Messiah. Today, we would say saved Jewish people, okay? There were a lot of them. So I think they had input into the Seder because there's a lot of Messianic stuff here. Okay, next slide. So now the first thing you have to do, and I did not bring candles because I didn't want to set off the fire alarm. The lighting of the candles. The woman always lights the candles because it is through the woman that the Messiah will come into the world. Genesis 3:15, fulfilled by Mary in Luke 2:7. So the woman brings the light of the world. So she always lights the candles, even on Shabbat. If any of you ever seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof? Okay, remember the scene where Golda is getting everybody in? And she says, hurry, hurry, hurry. The sun is almost down. It's almost Shabbat. And then they light the candles, and Golda's the one that lights the candles. It's always the lady. Next slide. And of course, so everything you do in Judaism, everything you have to, is a prayer, okay? But we pray over most things we do, but we just kind of like pray, right? We just have an extemporaneous prayer. But the Jewish people have prayers, okay? They have these prayers memorized. So the prayer for the blessing of the candles is something like, blessed are you. We're reading from right to left, okay? I know it's a little confusing, but Hebrew does go from right to left. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to kindle or to ignite the candles of the holiday, whatever it is, Passover, whatever. You want me to say it in Hebrew? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Pesach. And so there's a prayer for every part of this Seder. We won't do all of them, but just so you know, there's one for every single thing. This book has all of them. Next slide. The 4 cups. Now I put a little bit of grape juice up here. I didn't fill them full, okay? Now these 4 cups go with Exodus 6, 6 and 7. I will bring you out from the yoke of the Egyptians. I will rescue you from slavery. I will redeem you, and I will take you as my people. Next slide. The whole Seder revolves around those 4, we call them the 4 I wills that are here in Exodus. And you see I highlighted the I will. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you out of their bondage. I will redeem you I will take you to me for a people. So those cups represent those things. And next slide, they've been given names. The cup of sanctification, I will bring you out. The cup of the plagues, I will deliver you. I mean, how did God deliver them? Sadly, he had to bring 10 plagues upon the Egyptians. I will redeem you, and restoration, I will take you as my people. Next slide. So you dip the parsley, okay, and I did not bring water, but you can have salt water. You dip your parsley in salt water. And why do you use salt water? Because the salt water represents, first of all, the tears of the children of Israel as they were in slavery, and also represents the Red Sea, right? Salt water. Okay? And you can use hyssop. They used hyssop. We can use parsley. By the way, I just heard on the way over here, I was listening to The Land in the Book, which is my favorite podcast, and they were saying that hyssop now has almost become extinct because so many people in the Holy Land are like gathering it. And so there's a law now, and you can't gather hyssop anymore because they don't want it to become totally gone from the Holy Land. Next slide. Breaking of the middle matzah. So you take matzahs and you put them in a bag. Okay, now this is very, very messianic. You put them in a bag, and then you take the middle one, okay, and you break it. And when you break it, you put it in just a napkin, a white napkin, and you wrap it. And this is like the head of the Seder can do this. And either he hides it or he gives it to someone, and they hide this, okay? And then at the end of the meal, they let the children find it, okay? And we did this at my house the other night on Friday night before Easter. I had a real Seder at my house. I had 12 people, okay? Okay, note, I live in a tiny house. It's only one room. It's like 20 by 20. But we had great fun, didn't we? And we all fit in there. And we did play the Afikoman game. And we did all these things, okay? So the 3 pieces of matzah put in the bag, the middle was broken, hidden away, and brought back at the end. Now that, to me, and to most people, that is very, very much a type of Jesus, right? The 3 pieces being like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. The middle one broken in his death, wrapped in a cloth, hidden away, and then brought back with much rejoicing. Because when you bring, whoever finds it gets a prize, so they're happy, right? You're supposed to be money or something like that. That's very messianic. So how did that get into the Seder? I think Jewish people who were believers put it in there. I think they did. By the way, the word afikomen is Greek. Next slide. Now, if there's anything that doesn't make sense, you can always ask me afterward. But and I know I'm kind of going fast, but I was just trying to get through it all. But if there's something you need to ask about afterward, please come up and ask, and I'll be happy to help you. So it's a key component of the Seder and has these messianic meanings and has been added after the New Testament era, okay? But it's very important. But the Jewish people, they really don't see it as messianic unless they're already saved, okay? But the very first time I ever went to a Seder, before I ever read any books about it, I was like, wow, I can't believe that's in there. So, okay, next slide. Now, I remind you of this verse in Corinthians, and when he had given thanks and break it, he said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. So remember, this just reminds us that Jesus' body was broken on the cross. The broken piece of matzah. Okay, next slide. The 4 questions. The youngest person present who can read is supposed to ask the person doing the Seder the 4 questions, okay? And so then the second thing is you have to ask them in Hebrew. And then the third thing is they really sing them because it's set to a little melody. And the interesting thing about it is, if you do this Seder here in America, or if you do it in India, or if you go to Antarctica and do the Seder, when it comes time for the 4 questions, all the Jewish people are going to sing it to the same melody. Isn't that amazing? Because that's the melody it was written to, and it really doesn't matter what language you speak or what culture you're from, because it's going back to the Hebrew, okay? So why is this not different from all other knots? Ma, nishtana. Ma, what? Nishtana is the difference. Halayla, not. Hazeh, this knot. Halala, hazeh. Mikol, from all the other. Halilot, from all the other knots. Ma, nishtana, halayla, hazeh. Mikol, halilot. That's how they sing it. That's how it starts. That's the question. Why is this knot, meaning Nisan the 14th, why is it different? All the other knots. Because it's the knot of the Passover. Next slide. These are the questions. On all the other knots we eat bread with leavening, but tonight only matzah. On all the other knots we eat vegetables, but tonight only bitter herbs, the hyssop or the parsley. On all the other knots we do not dip, but tonight they dip 2 times. They dip the parsley in the salt water, and then later they dip in the matzah in this horseradish and choroset. And on all other nights, it's seating up, but on this night, we recline. Like I said, if you celebrate the Seder properly, everybody's supposed to kind of recline. Okay, next slide. And the response that the people, sometimes everybody says it, sometimes the Seder leader says it, but the response is, because, why is this not so different? Because we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. God brought us out with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. If God had not brought our ancestors out of Egypt, we and our children and our children's children would still be subjugated to Pharaoh. Even if we were old and wise and learned in the Torah, we would still be commanded to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Next slide. So now the second cup is the cup of the plagues. Remember, there were only plagues for the Egyptians, right? For the children of Israel, they were miracles.
Amen.
Right? But for the Egyptians, they were plagues, unfortunately. He's gonna free. How is he going to free them? I mean, he asked over and over, "Let my people go," and over Pharaoh said no. So the only way God's going to free them is he's got to bring these plagues. Next slide. The 10 plagues. The water to blood, the frogs, the lice, or gnats, whichever one you want to call it, the flies, the disease on the livestock, which that one kind of makes me sad because I have 10 cows and a sheep at our little farm in Pickens County. The boils, I just imagine that because see, I'm always outside and I get poison oak or poison ivy really easy. I'm surprised I don't already have it, and so I'm always got it. And so I'm thinking, but they had boils all over. It would be like having poison ivy everywhere, you know. The hail and the fire, the locusts, the darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn. Now, at the Seder, what you have to do is you take your cup, you fill it full of juice, and you take your finger, and everybody recites the plagues, and every time you take a dip out, a dip of the juice out and put it in your plate. And why do they do that? Because when you fill your cup, it's like the cup of wrath is full, okay? And you're taking a dip out, dip out, okay? So that's why they do it. Next slide. The lamb shank bone, I told you that is here. Okay, this is a real lamb bone. That's all that's left. You can't make sacrifices. No temple. Can't make a sacrifice without the temple. And that's the Seder plate. That's my plate. That's one up there, okay? Next slide. Speak unto the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. Remember, that's the 10th day. By the way, that would have been the day, the 10th, 4 days prior. That would have been the day of the triumphal entry. Okay? So the day of the triumphal entry, when Jesus rode in, he was presenting himself as the king, but in a way he was also presenting himself as the lamb.
That's right.
Okay? Next slide. So there, as I said, before the destruction of the temple, Jerusalem was very busy. All the people there, they're picking their lambs, they're getting ready for the Passover. But when the temple is gone, all this is gone. Okay, next slide. And here's a verse in John. John the Baptist, John the Baptizer, already told us this long ago. When Jesus first started his ministry, it said, he seeth Jesus coming to him to be baptized, and he said, behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. He already pointed him out in the very beginning. He's the Lamb of God, that is going to take away the sin of the world. Next slide. Okay, washing the hands. Jewish people wash their hands a lot, and at the Seder we wash our hands 2 times. I didn't put water in these because I didn't want to spill it. But you put the water in this one, and you're supposed to have running water, okay, as opposed to wipes, okay? You're not supposed to use wipes. You're supposed to use real water. And you pour it over your hands, and you catch it in this one, okay? Now, your hands should already be clean, so, you can't come to the Seder with dirty hands. This is more like a ritual thing. But they do this twice at the Seder. But I just remind you that what did Jesus do on the night of the Last Supper? He didn't just wash hands, he washed feet. Or he washed the disciples' feet. So he went a step farther than just washing hands. Next slide. The matzah, the plural, matzah is singular, plural is matzot, plural. In Hebrew, we make oat is the way we make things plural if it's a feminine word. So everyone has to partake of the matzah, and this part of the Seder does go all the way back to the original Passover meal. Okay, everybody has to eat matzah, and you have to eat it for 8 days. Next slide. And then the bitter herbs, I've already mentioned that. You dip the matzah in the bitter herbs, which is called maror. Okay, the word maror means bitter. Okay, that's the name of it, bitter. Remember when they crossed the Red Sea and they went to the bitter waters called Mara? Same word. And the bitterness is to remember Israel's slavery in Egypt. Next slide. The Hillel sandwich. Hillel was a very famous Jewish teacher, rabbi, and he came up with this idea. He said, well, you know what? We have to eat the bitter herbs, but maybe we can have something added to tone it down a bit. So this was his idea, haroset, which I have up here, okay? Haroset is like an apple and walnut and grape juice, and some people even add sugar. It's real sweet. So the chunks of the apples is supposed to symbolize the mortar, the bricks and the mortar that the children of Israel used to build everything they built for the Egyptians. But it takes the bitter herbs and tones it down a little bit if you add the haroset. And he invented the sandwich. So you put them both together between 2 pieces of matzah and eat it that way. And then that way the bitter herbs is not quite so bitter. Okay? Next slide. It's really good. I know y'all don't believe me. Isn't it good? They just saying that. Finding and eating the afikomen. So after you do all these things, you have a real meal, okay? Like real food, but it has to be Passover, you can't have leavening, so you can't have bread. But we had a really good meal the other night. After the meal, then you got to get the children to find the afikomen. We usually play the hot and cold game. You know, you're hot, you're cold, you're hot, and eventually they find it. And then whoever finds it gets a reward. Now, when they bring that piece back to the leader of the Seder, which is usually the father, and you know, these are at home, okay? The Seders now are at home, no temple, there's no temple. He usually breaks it up and lets all the members of the family partake of it. Everybody's supposed to eat at least one piece, little piece of the afikomen. And what is the implication for that is that each individual person has to trust in Jesus, right? It's not like, oh, my grandpa was a Christian, so I'm good. You know, it doesn't work like that. Everybody had to eat a piece of the matzah, and every individual person has to trust themselves in Christ. So that's the messianic part there. Next slide. The third cup, redemption, I will redeem you. Next slide. Remember, this is after the meal, okay? You're going to have that cup of redemption, and then you can have the last one. But we're also going to have this one, we're going to have Elijah's cup, okay? Now, at the Seder, you can have like a separate, if we were having a real Seder and everybody was sitting around tables, and we did it the other night. We didn't have a whole setting for him, but I just had a little cup for him off to the side. It is a tradition to have a place setting for Elijah because why? Because he's supposed to come first before the Messiah. And so at the Seder, you always send a child up to the door, a door that leads outside, and say, go look and see if you see Messiah. And they go and they open the door. No, he's not there. Okay. But he might come. And so why do they do that? Next slide. Because even the Jewish people know that Elijah is coming before the Messiah does. Now we know that Jesus said that John the Baptist was in the spirit of Elijah, right? So he came before Jesus' first coming, and he was the forerunner for Jesus. But Elijah himself is coming before the Messiah in the second coming. I think he's going to be one of the two witnesses. He's really coming back. Remember, he didn't die. He went up in a whirlwind. So he's really coming back before the Messiah comes back in the second coming. And that's why they're looking for him, because they are right to look for him. Elijah himself is going to appear before the second coming of Christ. And the final words of the Seder is next year in Jerusalem. L'shana haba'ah beYerushalayim. Why did they say that? Because now think, when they're celebrating this Seder, where are the Jewish people? They're all over the world, in the diaspora. They're in South America. They're here in America. They're in Russia. They're in England. They're in Poland. And they're thinking, this year we're here, but maybe, just maybe, next year we'll be back home. So for 2,000 years, as they celebrate the Passover, what are they always looking ahead to? When they can go back home and when Israel becomes Israel again. Next slide. That slide was actually supposed to be, I already told you that. I got them reversed in order. But anyway, I already told you that. Elijah is coming before the second coming of Jesus, as prophesied by Malachi. Next slide. Okay. Is there one more? Go. Okay, good. Good. I thought I had these in there. Okay, so now, of all the messianic things I've taught you, this to me is the most important, okay? So you got to get this part. Remember the two words I told you? Moedim, which is translated as feast, and Mikraim, which is translated as convocation or appointments, right? Those two words. Now, God told the children of Israel, he said, every year, year after year, year after year, you're going to celebrate all of these 7 feasts. And they are feasts, which means you got food, except Yom Kippur, there's no food. And they're Mikraim, they're an appointment. So year after year, year after year, year after year, they're celebrating these. But by giving them that name, Mikraim, what was God saying? He was saying, but at some point, there's going to come a time when God himself is going to come down. He's going to keep the appointments with Israel. Did it happen? When did Jesus die? He died on Passover. God himself came down and he kept the appointment. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now today, Passover is 8 days. It's just 8 days. But really, if you read it in Leviticus, Passover was only 1 day, Nisan the 14th, and then unleavened bread is 7 days, 15 through 21. Today, the Jewish people kind of clump it all together and say, oh yeah, we have to eat matzah for 8 days. But just remember, it was different. It was separated. So the matzah, no leavening in the matzah. What is leaven? Always a type of sin, right? But Jesus, he had no sin. And his body did not see corruption. So he is fulfilling these feasts. Now the third one, first fruits, that one is going to happen on the day after Shabbat, which is Saturday, after Passover. On the Sunday after Passover is always first fruits. Okay? Now remember, Passover can happen on any day. But on the year that Jesus died, it was a 3-day interval. Because he said, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. I think that Passover was on Wednesday myself. Good Friday is a total Catholic thing. All those things are Catholic. Ash Wednesday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, all that's Catholic stuff. We're not Catholic. So, first fruits is the resurrection, right? Now here's something really funny. Y'all like funny stories? This was many years ago when I lived in Charleston 22 years, and I took Hebrew for 18 of those years. And on Monday night, we always had our Monday night Hebrew class, okay? So on Sunday night of Easter, I had went to a church in Augusta, Georgia. I had done this huge Seder in a gymnasium for 300 people, and then drove all the way back to Charleston so that I could be back in my Hebrew class on Monday night. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just studying my book, trying to make sure I know how to read it. And all my classmates, they're all Jewish, and my teacher, Tzipi, is Israeli. And I hear them all whispering, do you know what the bunnies and the rabbits mean? And the eggs? I don't know what it means. And they're all whispering, because the previous day was Easter. And Tzipi says, she always called me Jiki. Jiki, you are our Christian. You will explain to us the bunnies and the eggs. And usually I would never do anything like this. And I don't know really what possessed me. But I just looked at her and I said, I have no idea where the bunnies and the eggs come from, but I can tell you that Moses celebrated Easter. And the room got so quiet. And she said, Jiki, I have taught the Tanakh my whole life. I can assure you he did not celebrate or write about Easter. I said, yes, he did. She said, okay, now you get to explain that. And I thought, good, that's what I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to talk about the bunnies and the eggs. So then I spent 10 minutes telling them this because they didn't know. And when I finished, she said, okay, turn to page 23. Let's start our class. But I at least got to tell them. Okay? Now there's one more in the spring. Okay, you wait 50 days from first fruits. You count 50. And in 50 days is Shavuot. The Hebrew word Shavuot is just named, that's the word for week. Week is Shavua, Shavuot. Again, the ot, the plural, you hear it? Weeks, 7 weeks plus 1 day. Now in the New Testament it's called Pentecost because they went, first of all, they're in Greek and they're doing 50 days, and in Hebrew is doing 7 weeks. And on that day, Shavuot, was that one kept? Yep. Because again, God, in the form of the Holy Ghost, this time came down.
That's good.
And he kept that holiday. So that's the first 4. Now the next slide. And the next one, there's 3 more. Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and Sukkot, or Tabernacle, the fall ones. Okay? Those haven't been kept yet. But they will be, just as exactly as the first 4. And when will they be? They will be in the tribulation. We won't see it. Okay? Sorry. But it's nice to know about it. It'll happen in the tribulation. God will keep those 3 just like he kept the first 4. So I can, if y'all want me to, I can come back and we can have another session in the fall. We can talk about trumpets and we can build a sukkah. We can do whatever y'all want to do. I've built many sukkahs for children. They love them. Okay, they love them. You can build them out of PVC pipes. Next one, next slide. Now I think this is the last one, and I put this in here because this is very important to me. There is a huge, there's like so much anti-Semitism right now, and there are so many Christians, even independent Baptists, at least they say they are, and they are turning against Israel. And we have experienced a lot of it in Pickens County. Now, I knew this verse was in there because I couldn't remember the address. So other day, I spent over an hour looking with my Bible software. I could only remember one word in the verse. So I looked up that one word, and I had to look through like 800 verses. But I found it. And when I found it, I was like, yes, here it is. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Isn't that how God always identified himself? Anytime he appeared in the Old Testament, how did he say, I'm the Lord thy God, the Lord of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, the God that did what? That brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. Every single time he identified himself like that. But here he says, I don't want to be called that anymore. But I want to be called the Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from the lands where he had driven them, and I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. In other words, he says, I'm the God that's reversing the diaspora. And he has. Because we have a little nation over there in the Middle East that I love very much called Israel, and it's there because God has reversed the diaspora. And he says, now, that's more important, that he's the God that did that. In God's eyes, that's even more important than parting the Red Sea. So remember that God is the one that has put Israel where they're at. And he's the one that brought the Jewish people back there from all over the world. And he's done a whole lot of other things too. And if we had another hour, I could tell you all kind of things that he's done, but he's done that. So remember that, and remember to pray for the Jewish people and for the nation of Israel. And they really need our prayers. But let me tell you, there's many, many Jewish people coming to know the Lord. Don't think they're not. You go online to this website called imetmessiah.org, and you can hear testimony after testimony of Jewish people who are coming to know the Lord. And it's really amazing. And a few years ago, I heard an interview of a guy, and he said it was when Israel was turning 75. This year they're turning 78. He said, if you 75 years ago in 1948, if you went out on the streets of Jerusalem and interviewed people and said, hey, do you know a believer? Or do you know anyone Jewish who owns a New Testament? In 1948, he said 90% of the people would have said no, and only 10% would have said yes. I know someone who actually owns a New Testament, or I actually know a Jewish person who is a believer in Yeshua, because there were only a couple of hundred. And this guy in the interview said today, and remember this was 3 years ago, today if you go out to Jerusalem and you interview people and you ask the same question, guess what? He said it's going to be just reversed. He said 90% are going to say yes. I know a Jewish person who believes in Yeshua, and I know someone who has a New Testament, and only 10% are going to say, no, I don't know a thing about it. Isn't that amazing? Now, that doesn't mean they're all saved, but it means they're coming. Okay, they're coming. Big revival. They're coming. And these Bibles go out a lot. This one here is a Hebrew-only New Testament, and I send a lot of these to people who are going to Israel, and it's very nice because it's small, and they can give them out. And you know what? The Orthodox people even take these. And you know why we made it so? Bible Society made it so small, because the Orthodox people actually, some of them want the New Testament, but you know what? Peer pressure. They'll walk past and you'll say, hey, if they're with their friends, hey, would you like a new... No, I don't have anything to do with that. But I know that my Bible Society used to go to Jerusalem every year, and they said that to the Jerusalem International Book Fair, and they would put up Bibles, and they said the Orthodox would come through 2 or 3, and they'd try to give them, no, we don't want them. And they said, but later... they would come back, single, only one person, and they would say, can I have one? Well, see, they didn't want their friends to know that they were actually getting a New Testament. So this one, they made it especially for them, because they can hide it, okay? And they can read it, and it can be hidden, and that's okay. So they're taking the Bibles. And the last one I want to show you, the last Bible, is this one. This one right here. Can y'all see it? This Bible, this is the Bible without the Jewish people. It's blank. Because without them, we don't have one. Because they wrote it. God used them to write it. So if no other reason, we should be thankful for them, because they gave us the Bible and they gave us the Savior. So that's it. That's all I have. I don't know if you want them to ask questions or if you want to do that later, however how you want to do it. I'm happy to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, then Anselm and Shalin can answer.
Me know English.
So.
That's not even.
So, do you want them to ask questions, or you want to wait?
Anybody's got a question?
Anybody have a question? You only get 4. Anything not make sense? I know it's a lot to digest. Yes.
How about people got interested in having a Seder at their home? How would they begin to do that? How would they, like you did, you had a Seder at your house?
Just give me a call and I'll come do it for you.
Really? Would you come and sing and you're beautiful? Would you bring my child for me at my Seder? Would you do that?
We could work it out.
So really, so we could contact you and get,
Yeah, I mean we had one last week.
That's great.
Yeah, it takes a couple of hours. It's a lot of work. They did all the cooking. Charlene made matzo ball soup. It was great. Have to have matzo ball soup.
I actually had one, and that's what we did, was Seder. We did matzo ball soup, and then we did a roasted chicken, so.
Yeah, we had roasted
Costco,
chicken,
right? It's so easy.
and we had rosemary potatoes and salad.
That's great. But I would love to, maybe ask a question or something. That would be great. I didn't know that we could contact you. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here to help you.
That's wonderful.
Anybody else? Anything else? Y'all better ask one, or I might ask y'all one. Okay. Well, it looks like they're all okay.